Hey everyone, welcome to Fantasy Footy Fan, it's Jeff here. I want to talk in this video about buy strategy and team strategy heading into round one and the strategy I'm applying to my team. I'll also discuss an alternative strategy and show you the team that I would select applying this strategy as well. Now, in my past videos, I've shared a lot of stats on a lot of players, and so I'm just going to share a few more player stats with you after I did another statistical deep dive during the week. I'll also share with you some news as well, just some player comments, coaches' comments, and some information from some of the intra-club matches this week. But basically just anything relevant to SUPERCOACH. A very brief update to my team before I get started, because if you've had a look at my team reveal and then my Feb update, you'll notice there's been some few changes and a lot of changes actually in this team. I'll try and be as brief as I can so we can get straight into strategy talk. But a brief update, so I traded Chapman to Winhager as Chapman injured his hamstring and he's going to miss the start of the season. Winhager is expected to get an inside mid-roll and he's due for a third-year breakout. He's got that upward trend from his first year to his second year, now in his third year. So I think there's a lot of potential around Winhager. I'm not expecting Sweet to play in round one. Ken Hinkley said that it would be unlikely that they will have more than one ruck in the team. And that Soldo can play up forward as well, which would be to their advantage. So reading between the lines, it doesn't look good for Sweet starting in round one. So I traded in Livingston, as West Coast have a lot of Sunday games, so he'll be good for the captaincy loophole. But I'm always open to having a playing ruck on the bench. I've got 36k spare, so I could use that on bringing in Sweet if I have to bring him in if he's playing round one. I also traded out Roberts to Wilson, and that gives me that mid-forward flexibility in my midfield that could come in handy. I also brought in Sexton, as well, as it appears that he is the one that's going to have that halfback role and not Budarick, or at the very least, Budarick may be the one who gets rotated through there and Sexton will have the permanent role. But, you know, again, this is just talk for now, but we'll see, when the preseason game happens. Unfortunately, we get to see it in the round 0 game too. So we'll actually definitely see who has got that role. And of course, if it's Sexton, I'll definitely have him in my team at this price. I've also made a huge structural change to my team. I traded out Sicily, Laird, and Clay Hall, who was on my bench, for Yo, Horn Francis, and Nick Martin. Now, Sicily's stats aren't the best with Blank out of the team, as some of you might know. Blank is out for the season. I think it was his ACL he might have done, so he's out for the season. And in 8 games last year, Sicily averaged 100 with Blank out of the side. So that's like a 10 to 15 point downside there. Now, does that mean that Sicily's going to average 100 this year? Well, no. But the statistical history shows that Blank does have an influence on Sicily. Sicily seems to get more attention when Blank is not in the team. In those 8 games, Sicily was tagged twice and he played on a key forward 6 times. And I just want to thank Fantasy Freako for those stats on Sicily without Blank in the side. I was expecting Laird to average around 115 to 120 this year. And he still may do that, but with Adelaide likely to get more pace through that midfield and run more players through there like Rochelle, Rankin, Pedlar, Saligo, etc., it may actually impact Laird's score. So it may be more the 110 to 115 that Laird ends up scoring as opposed to the 115 to 120 that I was initially predicting. Clay Hall, Now I had him on the bench, but the news coming out is that they're impressed with him at West Coast, but it's going to be difficult to see him land a position in round one and be named in the team. So I've taken Clay Hall out and I've put Sharp on my bench, which I'm actually really happy with, and I'll go through you with Sharp in the moment. Now, the reports coming out of West Coast is that Yo is the fittest he's ever been, and he's the number one mid leading the way in that team. Now, yes, I know, we've heard all that before. It appears that it does look a little bit different this time, but we probably also heard that too. So I'm still going to, take the gamble on him. And look, you've got to have a plan with Yo. If you're going to have him in your team, you've got to have a plan, because there's every chance that he could get injured. So in my case, my plan A is to trade him down to Coleman after Coleman's bye in round 2, if Yo gets injured that early. So we'll have to just wait and see how Yo goes on that. Now, do I have a plan B? No, but I probably should have a plan B for Yo. So I might look into that as well. I've shared a number of stats and information on Horne-Francis in previous videos. Ken Hinckley said that he's expecting big things from Horne-Francis this year. Horne-Francis had surgery on both of his knees at the end of 2022, and he didn't train until Feb 2023. Now, he's training at a level he's never trained before. That's Ken Hinckley's words. And that he's been a consistent high performer across the summer. So, that adds further confidence if you've got Horne-Francis in your team. And it appears that Horne-Francis, how much is he owned? He's owned by 5%. So he's a bit of a pod as well, which is not bad. So of those those owners, there's 5% of owners. I think you might be on a winner. With Horne-Francis. Of course, 95% of the competition don't agree, but I don't know. I'm predicting big things for Horne-Francis in his third year. Now, Nick Martin, he's playing exclusively at halfback this year. That is confirmed. Apparently, he is playing the Nick Dacos role. That's what was mentioned in the reports. So I assume the role where you just don't play on your man and you run around as you want and you just get the ball at will. So if he's playing that role, then that's looking really good. It was looking good for him anyway. He has been scoring so well on a wing, and wingmen don't normally score that well. He's got that upward trend in his first and his second year, due for a third-year breakout, and if he's playing half-back, I'm expecting, hopefully a 100-point average, maybe even more. Well, I mean, that's, I'm shooting for the stars there, but I'm hoping that. And actually, that's how I've worked it out. I've compared the potential averages of each of these plays to see which one comes out on top. So, Sicily, I expect to average 110, Laird 115, and Sharp, who I had on the field, a 70, and that totals a 295 points between all of them on average per game for the year. I think Yo, Horne-Francis, and Martin will all average around 100, maybe Horne-Francis 95, but I think Martin and Yo could potentially average 100 to 105, and that takes their total up to a minimum of 300 points per game on average. So based on that, I think that these new trades will be a win. But again, look, it's a gamble. The safe bet is, of course, going with Sicily and Laird and Sharp on the ground. That's the safe bet. But going with Yo and Martin and Horne-Francis, I think that really does allow me to spend some money elsewhere and secure my bench a little bit as well. That's the other advantage that I've got, is that I used to have Clay Hall on the bench, and his job security is not good. Whereas now I've got Sharp on the bench, and he's got job security. He's a guaranteed round one starter, guaranteed on that wing. Especially now that Chapman's out of the team, that even guarantees his spot even more. So that really firms up my bench, and I'm actually pretty happy with that. Okay, let's just get that out of the way. That's out of the way now. My team update for, what are we, mid-Feb. Let's talk strategy. And the first thing I want to talk about is DPP status. Now, when we start round 1, oh, by the way, DPP status, I'm talking the status after round 6, when some of the players change, get forward status, mid status, defender status. That's what I'm talking about. So we tend to approach round 1 of Supercoach not necessarily thinking too far ahead. The purpose of bringing this up is just to get our minds thinking of after round 6 and that potential DPP status and how we can use that to our advantage. So I'll give you an example. So with my team, I've got Dacos, Yo, and Winhager all having defender status. Young will also get, all having defender and mid status, those 3. And Young will also get mid status. That's 4 players that will have defender mid status. Now in my midfield, I will have likely Martin. If he plays halfback, he will be a defender mid. McKercher, he's playing off halfback. He's a defender mid. I've got Wilson. Hopefully he plays. And if he does, he's a mid forward. So I've got those players in my midfield, and that's great. I've got, I can do swaps in my defense and swaps in my forward line as well. And then going to my forward line, I've already got a heap of mid forwards here, but I've also got Sexton. Now, if Sexton gets that, if he's playing off halfback, then he will get that defender status as well. So that could be handy, having a defender forward. I could definitely do some trades and swaps and upgrades and so forth. So this is what I mean by just, not necessarily like really putting a heap of time in and planning and so forth, but it's good to have it in the back of your mind, these potential players that could get DPP status, and you could even do some planning for that, a little bit of planning anyway, expecting some of these players to change and have an extra position, and then maybe you might be looking at bringing in a player because another player is getting DPP status. So the only reason I bring it up is just to be aware. Have it in the back of your mind. We may not think about it sometimes, but it's good to have it in the back of your mind. So finally, let's get into early buy strategy. Now, are you going to be the conservative type, the worried about early buys, not pick the players that you had your heart set on because they now have the early buy? Or will you be aggressive or ignorant and just pick the team that you want to pick regardless of the buys? Are we overreacting to all this early buy stuff? Or do we try to find some balance? If you're deciding on 2 players to pick between and one of them has the early buy, then maybe you pick the other player. So that's kind of a balanced view of things. So there's 3 different kind of ways to approach it: a conservative, aggressive or ignorant, depending on which way you look at it, and a balanced view. So these are the decisions that we have to make. If you listen to my initial team reveal video, I was just absolutely set out on picking my best team. So I was the aggressive or ignorant type, whichever way you want to look at it. And since then, I have changed my stance a little bit. Now, I actually don't believe the buys will be as big of a deal as we are all making it out to be. It is a long season. So I'm more of a 70-30. So picking my best team, but making the occasional change to avoid so many players having the buy. So I'll go through my strategy for my team and I'll explain the reasons for the decisions that I've made. Now, when picking this team, I've had 2 clear strategies in mind. Firstly, having buy players that are owned by more than 50% of the competition plays to your advantage, as you won't be hit that hard because more than half the teams in the competition will also be affected just like you. Secondly, I'm not picking any players that have the round 2 buy unless they're a cash cow. So that's no Brisbane and Carlton players. Now the reason for this is they play in round 0 and round 1, and then they have the buy. So as we know in SuperCoach, their price is not affected after 2 games. It's after that 3rd game that they get a price increase or decrease. So because their price isn't going to be changed or affected, I'm not desperate to start any of these players. Now, of course, Zach Williams is the exception. Now, the thing with Zach is that he is owned by 60% of the competition. Let's see. I'm pretty sure it's 60%. I think it is, yeah. So it is. So 60% of the competition. So I get back to that thing that, there'll be more than half the coaches, super coaches out there that are going to own Zach Williams as well. So I'm actually happy to start with him because of his value and his ownership. And his inclusion will hardly affect my team in relation to my best 18 score for that round. Walsh is the only other one. So he's the one that I am actually having a think about, a more serious think about. And when we look at Walsh, he's owned by 32% of the competition. So, that's, nearly a third of the competition own Walsh. So you could look at that, in 2 ways. You could look at that as high ownership, and you could, bring Walsh in and feel like you're not going to be affected too much. That's one way to look at it. I'm still not going to start with him, again, because I want to just give him those 2 games. And then if I really want to bring him in, if he's like smashing it in round 0 and round 1, I can bring him in after his buy at his original price before it goes up. Maybe I might look at trading Adams for him and bringing maybe Wilson into my forward line and Adams into my mid, and then trading him to Walsh. And then maybe I'll have to make a second trade to get the cash I need to upgrade from Adams to Walsh. Remember, we have 40 trades this year. So we can kind of play it a little bit like AFL Fantasy, where you've got so many trades that you can be a little bit more flexible and looser with your trades this year. Now, aside from that, I'm not considering any other Brisbane or Carlton player unless a good rookie pops up. Actually, having said that, if Coleman is averaging 110 after 2 rounds, you just have to consider that at his price. I think he's about 398,000, I'm pretty sure. Let's see, yeah, so yes, so 398,000, and he's owned by 18%. So there's a few teams on him as well. So I would have to consider that. And I'm not saying I'm going to trade him in, but he has to come under consideration. So looking at my team now and why I've chosen the players I've chosen, taking into account all that information. So in round 2, as I mentioned, I've got Zach Williams. Now he'll be missing in round 2. I'm hoping that Reed or Hall could come in for him. I mean, I really don't think their scores are going to be anywhere near Williams' scores, but it's good to have a warm body on the field. But I still think either way that my best 18 is going to score well. And as I said, with Williams, he's owned by 61%? Is that what I said? 61%, 60%, sorry, of the competition. So again, I don't think I'm going to be too affected. But moving on to round 3. So I'm going to actually have Green missing, but I'm hoping that Sharp is playing really well. The advantage of having Sharp on the bench now, and I could maybe cover Green with Sharp, and Sharp should hopefully score okay. And then I'll have Flanders missing and Sexton missing. So I've got 3 missing if Sexton is playing halfback and I've got him in my team. So I'm really hoping that my best 18 can be competitive with those players missing. I think it's worth starting with these players. That's why I've got them in my team. And I think my team can recover, because particularly with Green, Flanders and Sexton, by the time their buy comes around, I'm actually expecting their prices to increase, because I think they're actually, all 3 of them are undervalued, especially if Sexton is actually playing off halfback. He is tremendously undervalued. So again, it's one of those things where I'm just taking a gamble and we'll just have to wait and see. When I look at the percentage of ownership, so if we have a look at Green, he's 22% owned. So that's not a heap, but it's a decent amount. And then Flanders, he's 35% owned. which is at least just around a quarter, around a third of the competition. So I think that I'll come through round 3 okay. I mean, you may not agree, and of course that's fine. I just love the fact that when I come out of the buys, I don't have to try to trade these guys in. I'll already have Green, Flanders, and Sexton, and I think that that'll really hold my team in good stead. Round 5 is going to be the other interesting one, but I actually don't think I'm going to be that bad, and I'll explain why. So round 5, I've got Dacos missing. I've got Grundy missing, and I've got Adams missing as well. So I'm hoping that, again, you've got Reed or Hall coming in for Dacos. Again, there's no comparison really. Grundy, now, again, Sweet may be in my team. So if Sweet starts round 1 or Conway starts round 1, I can bring one of them in. And then for Flanders, it'll just depend on who I have on the bench that can come in. Sorry, not for Flanders, for Adams. So we'll have to see. Now, I'm going to take maybe a little bit of a hit, but I don't think it's going to be that bad, and I'm happy to do it, and I'll explain why. So in the long run, I actually think that I'm going to get some really good scores, particularly from Dacos and Grundy, up until their bye in round 5, I think it is. The other good thing is that I won't have to use 2 trades to get them in after their bye, because I'll already have them. And I think Dacos, and particularly Grundy, I think their prices are going to really go up. There's going to be a pretty big jump for them in those first 5 games. The other thing is that Dacos, he is owned by 62% of the competition, and Grundy, he is owned by 65% of the competition. So I get back to that point of the fact that they're owned by a lot of teams. So it's not going to affect me too much, because when these players are out, a lot of other teams are going to be affected as well. So I don't think I'm going to be, as my best 18 score, I don't think it's going to be as affected. Now, Adams is the only one, because I think Adams is only owned by 14% of the competition. So that's not a lot, but it's it's something. It's not under 10%, so it's not like he's a pod. So the other thing actually with Adams, I'm expecting him to average around 90, because again, as I've mentioned in previous videos, I think he's playing exclusive mid over 70% CBAs. So I think by round 5, I think his price will go up. If he's averaging 90, his price should go up to around 500k, and that's a $70,000 increase. If I want to maybe trade him at his buy, I've got that flexibility to do so. He'll be worth 500,000k or $500,000. So I could possibly, if I haven't traded him for Walsh by then, I could trade him for maybe another player, swap Wilson or someone like that. Anyway, again, a lot can happen in those first 6 rounds. So, they're some of the things that I'm obviously thinking about with these strategies for the players I've picked. Actually, a really good strategy could be with those players with the early buy who are owned by more than, say, 60% of teams. So I'm talking, your Dacos and your Grundy and even your Williams, for that matter. Gawn's 50%, so you could probably throw Gawn in there too. So with those players, you could actually start with a player who doesn't have the early buy, so that you would be in the smaller number of teams that has a player playing when these other teams are missing their player. So that could be a good strategy. So with Dacos, you could maybe have Stewart or Sicily. With Gawn or Grundy, you could have Sherry or maybe another player, or if you can afford it, you could have Marshall or English. And then with Williams, maybe you could have Curtin. Now, I'm assuming a lot of you who are listening to this have probably already thought about that. And maybe that is your strategy. And good on you if you have. I think it's a good strategy, and it's something that could really pay off. For me, I just like the idea of starting with these guys. I just think they're going to score well, and I'm just going to love the fact that when I come out of round 6, I don't have to waste any trades or worry about making more trades to get money to try to get these guys in. I just love the fact that I've got them from the start of the year, and I'm expecting to have, at least Dacos and Grundy, I'm expecting to have for the year. They're keepers for me. Dacos, obviously. Grundy, I think, is going to do very, very well. Adams is not a keeper. I don't think he's a keeper. One of my strategies or plans, probably like most of you, I'm going to really look out after round 6 for the DPP changes. I'm really hoping there's a really good mid that has received forward status, and then I'll look to probably upgrade Adams to one of those premium mids that have gotten forward status. That's what I'll be looking to do. Now in round 6, I'll only be missing Gawn, but again, I don't think I'm going to be affected too much. Gawn's owned by 50% of the competition. That's a decent amount. So the other half have him, one half don't, and that's still a lot. So I think I'll come out of round 6 really well, remembering as well that I'll probably be using a few trades I'll probably have using a few trades in that time, and I think that'll hold me in really good stead after round 6, because my plan is to really aggressively launch after round 6, and I'm hoping that my best 18 scores and my round 1 and my round 4 scores of my best 22 is really going to score well. Again, I mean, that's what we're all banking on, right? So the other thing I wanted to talk about was this alternative strategy that I was speaking about earlier, and what that is keeping the same structure that I've got. Well, not exactly the same structure, a similar structure, probably more the structure I had before I made some of these changes. And then keeping the same rookies and bringing in players that don't have the early buy. So basically my starting 18, none of them will have an early buy. There's probably teams out there, maybe your team, where you've done that. You've just gone, nah, not having any early buy players. I just want players playing all the time. So in this case, I was thinking that what I could do for my defense is I could maybe have, and I've thought about this already, but I could have like Sicily, Stewart, and Young, and Winhager as the mid-pricer. I could have them in my defense, in my midfield. Now again, of course, the rookies would be Williams, Caulfield, Reid, and Hoare. And then in my midfield, I could still have Butters and LDU and Sarong. And I would have to trade Green out. So I would trade Green to Steele. I've got Nick Martin and Horn Francis. I could keep them in if I wanted to, because they don't have an early buy, or maybe I could go back to my older structure and bring in Rory Laird and a rookie and have them in there. For the rucks, Gawn and Grundy, well, you can't have them. So I would probably have English and Marshall. And then in my forward line, I would have to trade out Flanders and Adams, and I would have in place McRae, and I would have to bring in a rookie to be able to afford some of these other players. So probably a Zane Dersma, and I would keep the rookies. So in the midfield, McKercher, Sanders, Wilson, Sharp, Clark, Clay Hall, even, and then in my forward line, it would be Reid, Sexton. Well, Sexton is the other one. Like, would I keep him? I can't really keep him, so I would have to take him out and bring in another player who doesn't have the early buy, and I'd have Darcy and Manor. So that could be another option, is having another team that doesn't have, or have players with no early buys. I know my brother-in-law, in his team, he doesn't have any players. Well, rookies, he does have some players that have the early buy, but he's starting 18 on the field, doesn't have any buy players. So it'll be interesting to see how his team goes in comparison to mine. So I thought that's going to be a really interesting strategy for teams who approach it that way. So in relation to some of the stats that I've come across in the last sort of week to 2 weeks or so, I've already shared a lot of stats on Gawn in my previous videos, but the interesting thing with Gawn, another stat, as you may or may not know, in round 2 last year, Gawn got injured very early on and he scored a 0. Now, if we take that game out and if we include his finals games, then he ended up playing 21 games throughout the year. And in those 21 games, he averaged 111. Now, that's probably 7 points upside on what his actual average was. And you might think, well, that's okay. But with that average of 111, that actually includes, well, most of those 21 games would be with Grundy, and he still averaged 111. So that's pretty decent, but it gets better than that. Of the 9 games last year that he played where he had over 70% CBAs, he averaged 125. Now, in those 9 games, there was a handful that he didn't play with Grundy, but the other games he did play with Grundy, and likely Grundy probably started on the bench or played in the forward line for Gawn to have over 70% CBAs. The thing that we know for certain is this year, Gawn is definitely going to average over 70% CBAs for the year. Is he going to average 125? Well, we can't say that for certain, but he's averaged around that mark in the past, and there's no reason why he can't do it again this year. He is obviously getting a bit older. I think he's going to be 32, or he's already 32. So does he have another year in him? I think he does. I think he's massive unders, and it makes sense why he's owned by half of the teams in Supercoach. With Zach Butters, in the 5 games that he played last year from rounds 20 to 24, so the last 5 games of the regular season, he averaged 139. He also had a top score last year of 184, which was against Melbourne at home. Now, I've shared a number of other stats on Butters in my previous videos, but that's just another stat that just shows why he is going to have a great year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Zach Butters does this year. He's owned by nearly a third of the competition, and rightfully so, for good reason. An interesting player, I think, and would likely be a good pod, is Josh Rochelli. He's only owned by 2% of the competition. Now, he's priced at an average of 74, which is what he averaged last year, and he averaged 52 in his first year. So he's set for a third-year breakout. He's got that good upward trend, and he's expected to get more mid-time. I think that's pretty clear that they want to get a bit more pace in that midfield, so he'll be rotated through there. Now, last year, when Rochelle averaged over 50% CBAs, or 50% CBAs or more, he actually averaged 95. So is he going to get more games this year where he's going to have 50% CBAs? I actually think he will. So he could be a really good mid-pricer, a good pod that you may want to bring into your team. Now, people have wondered not just how much time Taylor Adams will get in the midfield, but why did Sydney get him in the first place? Now, whilst Adams has played half forward for most of the last 2 years, he's primarily an inside mid. Sydney was the second worst team in the AFL last year for clearances against, and the 4th worst team for contested possessions against. And I think it might have been Longmire, or it was someone from Sydney that said that they wanted an inside mid, and that was likely to address these issues. So Sydney went out, and instead of getting one inside mid, they got 2. They got Adams and James Jordan. Now, reports are that James Jordan will likely play on the wing, but they will definitely rotate him through that inside midfield role, along with Adams. But it's why I believe Adams will play a lot of mid this year. I actually expect him to get over 70% CBAs. But an interesting stat, just an interesting team stat, is out of the 6 worst teams for clearances against last year, 4 of them played in the 2 prelims, with Collingwood going on to win the premiership. So maybe clearances isn't the key stat that it used to be. I thought that was an interesting stat. Liam Baker, now he recently said that he's spent the whole preseason training and playing the practice games in the midfield. Now, since 2021, Baker has played 5 games where he averaged more than 45% CBAs. In those 5 games, he averaged 99. Baker, he is a defender forward, I believe. Yes, so he's a defender forward and owned by 3% of the competition. So, he's a good pod. And we'll just have to see whether he plays that role. He's priced at an average of 80, so could that average go up? The only thing with the Richmond midfield is that you've got Taranto, you've got Hopper, and you've got Prestia in there. There's talk of Dusty being fully fit and playing exclusively in the midfield this year. And then now apparently you got Baker and Thompson Dow, who's going to run through there, and Shai Bolton as well. So, how much mid-time is Baker going to get? But fortunately, because Baker plays for Richmond, we get to see him in his preseason game, but also in the round 0 game. So we'll actually get to see his role. Now, Michael Voss recently said about Orazio Fantasia that he coached Fantasia at Port Adelaide as an assistant, which, makes sense why he got him over to Carlton. Voss also said that he's completed 80% of the preseason and that he understands that there's question marks whether he'll get his body right, but he has really impressed, and he's been a true professional, and he's settled into the group. Now, Fantasia is a forward mid. I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Forward. No, he's just a forward, sorry. He's a forward priced at an average of 39. But he has reached an average of 83 back in 2018. Does he start in round 1? It's hard to say. He's an expensive rookie. But, if we're desperate for rookies in our forward line, then he could be, maybe a decent starter, or maybe someone that we bring in down the track if he starts to pick up a bit of form. Now, we know getting information out of the Cats is like getting blood from a stone, but Chris Scott commented this week on how impressed he's been with Oisin Mullin. Now, Oisin Mullin is a 153k defender. Yeah, 153k. Now we've heard this 1,000 times that Mullin is he was described as the Dacos of Gaelic football. So hopefully he gets a permanent role at half back. He could be really good value if that's the case. Scott also commented on Toby Conway and said that they're focusing more on Conway as a long-term prospect. Now that's not saying he's not going to play round 1, but it doesn't instill any confidence, and so it seems it's unlikely that Sweet and Conway will be there for round 1. So we'll need to plan either way for that. We had a few intra-club matches this week. I got to watch the North and the Pies intra-club games. In the North intra-club, Toby Pink looked pretty good, particularly in that first quarter. There's every chance he might get a game in round 1. LDU was just class above. He's a gun. If you've got him in your team, you can feel comfortable with that. Wardlaw looked great. He'll be a really good mid-pricer, I think. And McKercher also was great. I mean, McKercher really should be in 100% of teams. I just can't work out why he's only in 63% of teams. That's high, but it should be like up to 80% at least, 100 really. He's going to be great value this year. So yeah, if you have any of those players, LDU, Wardlaw, McKercher, they're going to do very well this year. So sort of moving on from that, these intra-club games, you're not really looking at a lot here because they're playing against each other. And I watched that game, that North Intra-Club game, and there wasn't like a lot of pressure. So what you're looking for is the players that you've already got in your team. You're looking to see if they're moving well, if they're fit. So like LDU, I've got him in my team. I was really looking at LDU to see how he moved and if he looked fit, and he did. And I was really happy with that. But we'll have to wait till the preseason game, and then if they're playing in round 0 to really see the role that a player has. Now, Lee Adams also made some comments. He's an assistant coach at North, and he said that Sheasel, McKercher, Fisher, and Scott will all be rotated through at halfback. Or will be playing at halfback is what he said. So to me, that says rotation. So for McKercher and even Fisher at their price, that's still okay. They'll probably make some good money and score fairly well. Scott, I think Scott might be injured. I'm not exactly sure. I'll probably have to follow that up. But with Sheasel, what does that mean for Sheasel? Does that mean that his average may drop a little bit if he's being rotated? Is he going to be at halfback and then in the midfield, and then pushing back at halfback? We'll just have to see how Sheasel goes. I still think Sheasel will have a good year, but it's just something to keep in mind. Now, with the Pies intra-club, there's already been a few write-ups about how well Finn Macrae played. He was awesome in that first quarter. Double-digit possessions, a stack of clearances. He looked great. Yep. It was Collingwood versus Collingwood. But he's in great nick. But to me, I still don't see how he gets into that grand final side. And I mentioned this in one of my other videos because I just don't know who they're going to drop. Everyone's been saying, Adams is out of the team, so Finn Macrae will come in. But you got to remember, in that grand final side, Adams didn't play, and McStay didn't play. So, and there's not many changes to that grand final team. Pretty much only Ginnivan is the only one out of that grand final team that is not there at the club still, and Schultz comes in for Ginnivan. Frampton will obviously come out, and he'll probably come in, probably Ash Johnson or Reef McInnes will come in for Frampton. So who does Finn Macrae come in for? The only thing I could think of is maybe they drop Lipinski as the sub, or Hoskin Elliott maybe, but I know Craig McRae likes those players. So it's a tough one because they don't want to lose McRae, so they're going to have to play him. So I'm not really sure what they're going to do. I think that there's a chance he may not start round one, or he starts as the sub. I really don't know anymore because he did really look good, and I reckon they might. I don't know, Craig McRae may end up playing him. Anyway, as you can tell, I really don't know what they're going to do. We'll just have to wait till round 0 to see if McRae gets named and the role that he plays. He'll obviously play in the midfield, but will he be in that round 1 team and starting, not as a sub? Now, in that intra-club, Dacos really did nothing. And what does that mean? Well, that means absolutely nothing. So we'll have to worry about Dacos. DeGoey looked great though. And I reckon he could go up another level this year. And hopefully that translates into better Supercoach scores if you have DeGoey. Charlie Dean and Reef McInnes, they're rookie priced, but likely won't get a game in round 1, in my opinion. But, we'll just wait and see. The Hawks had an intra-club match as well. It wasn't a good one. They copped a few injuries. We already know now with some of the news that Will Day, he will not play in round 1. And I'm pretty sure he's owned by a few teams. 1% of the competition owns Day. If you've got him in your team, trade him out. Dylan Moore as well. He's got glandular fever. He's owned by 2% of the competition. And it's likely he won't play round 1, but he may come back for round 1. But as we know with glandular fever, it really takes the stuffing out of you. So when he comes back to play, he won't be at 100%. I don't think it's a good idea starting Dylan Moore. And then, of course, we found out that Blank and Jayath, they copped some injuries. I think Blank is out for the year. I think I said earlier, is that right? The ACL, that's right, yeah. So he's out for the year. Jayath, I don't know how long he's out for. We already spoke about how Sicily might be affected with Blank, but how is Carl Amon going to be affected? He, I think, might be in a few teams. I think he's in maybe a few percent of teams. Where is he in the midfield? Yeah, he's at 2% of teams, so not a lot. But is his role going to be affected because he was on the wing, now at halfback, and Jayath was going to be on the wing, but maybe Amon might get moved to the wing. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. Now we've got some club v club match sims starting this Sunday between Melbourne and Richmond. They're going to broadcast that match on KO, and then there'll be some other club v club match sims next week on KO. So I'll be doing my best to watch as much of that as possible. So I'll be looking at these match sims, be looking at some news updates, and in my next video I'll sort of provide some knowledge on that. And I might even provide my best premiums in each position as well, because I haven't really discussed that as well. So, hopefully you got a fair bit out of that. Hopefully, particularly with strategy, this might have helped with you working out the strategy that you're going to use in your approach to round one and picking your team. Or maybe you've learned something where you've said, nah, yeah, thanks for exposing that to me. I'm not doing what you're doing. I think that's going to be terrible, and I'm going to go this way. If I've helped you in that way as well, well, then I'm satisfied. So anyway, like I said, hope you've really benefited from the video. Appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again in my next video.